Yes, this is a project that I and James Smith started back in the autumn, and I'm very grateful to the Solway Wetlands Partnership for a community fund grant to help us do this. James is a photographer who lives at Silloth, some of you may know him, and it's about the Bowness Common raised mire. And I see there's some lovely boards over there which explain about the Solway mosses and the raised mires, so I won't spend too much time on that at all. Let's get this right. Anything happening? No, wrong one. There you are. Right. So just to, you know where Bowness Common is, of course, most of you, and it's one of the several Solway mosses. You can see here, sorry, I'm not doing very well with this. Where's the pointer? There we are. There's the Solway Firth, and you can see, this is quite an old slide, 2004, you can still see Chapel Cross. Coming here, coming south, we're coming down towards Wampool, the River Wampool and Wittering. And here then is Bowness Common, and here too. And this is the remains in 2004 of the railway track, the Solway Junction Railway. And you can see here, in a much more recent view, James Smith's aerial photography view, using one of his drones. And we're looking actually south towards the Wampool. So here's the salt marsh up at Bowness. The old Bowness station is there, and here is the track going down across the common. So it's a very obvious mark on the landscape. And these peat bogs, why I was interested in this is because the raised mires, as you probably know, are a very special type of peat bog. They're not like a blanket bog. They form more or less in a depression, and in this case about 10,000 years ago. Water gets in there, sphagnum starts growing, sphagnum moss, some vegetation, and gradually the sphagnum builds up and up and up. So you end up with a kind of dome, an upturned saucer, if you like to think of it, which is only fed by rainwater. There are no other nutrients going into it. And they are a very special environment. And do read the very nice posters over there about them. Just move on. They have, as you know, special, lovely vegetation. And if you go out from RSPB Campfield onto Bowness Moss in the spring and summer, it's just wonderful, the colours. The mosses, you've got things like bog cranberry, you've got different colour sphagnum mosses, you've got heathers, sundews, here's a dragonfly, there are lizards, there are adders. It's absolutely gorgeous environment and incredibly peaceful as well. Very, very beautiful, very special place to go. The mosses were once used to a very large extent for peat cutting for individual families and also on a commercial basis. And here's another slide, 2004, looking down onto Bowness Common here. Rogerscuff, Peter talked about Rogerscuff on its a raised mound. This is a drumlin left over from the Ice Age, from the glaciers. So you can see very clearly, this is pasture land. Here's Bowness Common, here's Glasson, here's the Solway, and here are the remains of commercial peat cuts. Well, actually, they weren't even properly started, but Fysons owned a lot of land there for peat cutting. And there was a fair amount of peat cutting around the edge of the mire as well, the moss. So they were used for peat cutting, but now we realise that they're such an important environment that we shouldn't be damaging them. And we also realise, due to climate change, they're really important as carbon stores. And I won't go into that now, I don't think there's enough time. But essentially, plants use carbon dioxide from the air. The plants go, they die on the moss, and the acidic and anaerobic conditions preserve them. So the carbon is then locked up. If then, of course, you start damaging the moss, the peat, by cutting it, then this becomes oxidized and the carbon is released as carbon dioxide, and so contributing to climate change. So we now realise that we really, really need to look after these, not only blanket bogs, but these very special raised mires as well. And this is why I became particularly interested in Bowness Common, and of course in the railway, which you can see going along. This is Rogerscuff Crossing here. So the project then is in 3 parts. First, finding out how the railway was built and what effect this had on the common. Then looking at, that was in the 1860s and a bit later as well. Then finding out how it was dismantled in the 1930s and what effect that had on the moss. And then, with the help of Natural England and RSPB, looking at what's happening now in the restoration of the moss. So that's what James and I have been doing. Here then is a map that shows the Solway Junction Railway in red. It's coming from the Maryport and Carlisle Railway there, linking up to Abbey Junction. Then it joins the Carlisle and Silloth Railway for a little bit, and then it sets off across the moss, across the River Womple and to Bowness, and of course across the viaduct. That's the ghost. The viaduct. It was, the first sod was cut in 1865, and when I've had a lot of fun in this project actually, looking back at archives and old newspapers. And it's amazing, the descriptions. That, for example, one of the papers has about half a page of the cutting of the first sod, with descriptions of what everyone wore, who said what, here, here, cheers, and all this sort of thing. Anyway, it was 1865. The owners were Alex Brogden and Company, the engineer was James Brunlees, and the contractors were Waring Brothers and Eckersley. And I'm sure you've seen all these wonderful photographs of these cast iron piers going across. And at each end there was a sandstone embankment. Here again you can see the line. Here's Wittrig Station. It came across the Womple, up here past along Roger Scuff Crossing, and here the railway goes up to Herd Hill and eventually across there. So I've had to find out about Victorian engineering. I've looked at how the viaduct itself was built, what it was built of. We were talking earlier about sourcing of sandstone. That's been part of the project as well, finding out where the sandstone could have come from, where the rails came from, the ironwork. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of really interesting social history about the navvies that constructed it. And this is still very much an ongoing research project for me. So that's finding out about the navvies is proving very interesting. And there have been lots of wonderful railway enthusiasts who've helped me, actually. I've put questions on the forum, for example, for Cumbrian Railways and Caledonian Railways groups. And so many enthusiastic people get in touch with me and start telling me things about railways. I never thought I'd become a railway geek, but I'm loving it. It's really interesting. So there is masses of material to go through. Adverts, engineering drawings. In Carlisle Archives, there's an 8-foot long rolled up plan of the railway across the common. Why was it built? Well, it was built to shorten the journey between West Cumberland and Lanarkshire, so that the hematite, the iron ore from West Cumberland, could be taken, instead of going to Carlisle and Gretna all the way around, could go across the Solway and up to Lanarkshire, to the ironworks. And these plans here show, this is taken from part of the 8-foot plan. It shows across Bowness Common the line of the railway and all the various owners of bits of land which had to then be bought from them by the Solway Junction Railway Company. Some of the names perhaps you might even recognise now. Up at the north end, here's the Solway, and here's the line of the railway. We've got Mary Lawson, we've got Robert Robinson, John Topping. ARP is the area of land that had to be bought in acres, rods and perches. So all this had to be purchased all the way along the common, and before the building could begin. It was started in 1865. In 1868, there was a director's report in the paper, and Brunlees, the engineer, is saying the viaduct in the north embankment is complete, but there are difficulties on the south side. The drainage of Bowness Moss on section number 3 will, however, be resumed as soon as necessary arrangement can be made. Bowness Common proved a terrific problem. It was, as you imagine, very spongy. Anything they put on it sank. And so there was a great problem there with the soggy peat. They essentially had to build drainage ditches along each side of the railway. These were built out at one chain width, 66 feet. And apparently once they were in place, the water draining out of the peat was running like rivers, they say, down towards the Solway at one side and towards the Wampool at the other. And they also had to build cross ditches between the railway track itself and these ditches. So that was going on. They had to also put in bundles of wood, faggots, right along most of the track, in fact, and lay the sleepers on top of that. And on top of that, they laid ballast and what they called ash, which was probably clinker from other engines, railway engines. The level of the bog each side of the railway track apparently dropped by 4 to 5 feet as a result of this drainage. So when you start thinking about the integrity of the raised mire, it's seriously damaging it at that stage. And the peat was up to 50 feet deep in places, they reported. And that even modern coring shows it's 6 metres to 15 metres deep. So there's a lot of peat on that common. The thing you can think about, it's easy to talk about it being constructed. It was constructed. Well, there were hundreds of navvies probably working there. They were probably, if it was anything like Chat Moss further south, working with wooden boards on their feet as they tramped around. There'd have been horses, there'd have been carts. It had been incredibly difficult work, sloshing around in peaty water, trying to get this railway built. There wasn't much ballast available. There's a drumlin, a mineral island in the middle. They must have brought in most of the ballast, and I've been trying to understand how they brought it in and from where, and that's part of understanding also what happened to the moss. There's a lovely report in the Cumberland Packet of 1869, which I'll just read briefly, about the first railway engine on Bowness Moss. The Solway Junction viaduct across the Firth did not prove the most difficult part of the undertaking in an engineering point of view. The crossing of Bowness Moss was a much more perplexing undertaking. After the deep drains had been in operation and the water had been running in river-like streams on each side of the proposed line for many weeks, and the faggots in thousands had been laid, it was expected that something like a good foundation had been obtained. This hope was delusive. A line of rails was laid and an engine was run along, but one fine morning the engine nearly disappeared. I love the language of this. It sank down into the moss and looked like bidding farewell to the scene of its labours. But fortunately for the contractors, the steam was up and the engine had strength enough to drag itself out of its perilous position. Now all difficulties have been surmounted. Well, it wasn't quite that simple, actually. It went on for a long time with repeated worries. And at one stage, they had to put in 18-foot wide sleepers, and then more faggots, and then more sleepers, and then the rails, and so on. So it was a pretty tricky undertaking. And it wasn't until about 1870 that passengers were allowed along it. And you remember, it started in 1865. By that stage, however, heavy freight trains had been going along it. So it had proved its worth. The dismantling then. The building was obviously pretty horrendous, had pretty horrendous effects on the raised mire of Bowness Common. Then, of course, it eventually was dismantled. This was in the 1830s. Oh, I should just show you that. My husband John and I did manage just after Christmas to get out to the centre of Bowness Common. It's not an easy undertaking these days, I have to say. You do a lot of squelching and leaping and trying to find your way around. We got to the raised drumlin in the centre, and which is a cutting. Here, this pale line is the railway track, and here you can just see, at one chain, 66 feet, you can just see remains of a ditch there. But you can tell that the moss has been totally damaged and drained. So you've got all bracken, you've got heather, you've got all kinds of saplings, trees, and so on growing there. Right, why did it all go horribly wrong? Why did it have to be dismantled? Well, there were various horrors happened to the viaduct. Water got into the piers at one stage and froze, so that had to be repaired. Then in the winter of 1880-81, there was a very, very hard winter. And on neap tides, the huge plates of ice formed high up the Solway on the salt marshes. And when the next spring tides came, they lifted up these plates, some of which were apparently 10 feet thick, which seems astonishing. And these great plates were then swept down in the outgoing spring tide and crashed into the piers of the viaduct. And as you see there, 45 of the 193 piers were damaged. It was a seriously, seriously wounded viaduct at that stage. They did repair it, amazingly. It reopened in 1885, and freight trains and some passenger trains still went across. But gradually, the Solway Junction Railway just stopped being economical. It was no longer economical to carry the hematite from Cumberland across up to Lanarkshire. A lot of it was going by sea, cheaper imports. It's a familiar story, isn't it? So eventually, in 1921, the Caledonian Railway Company, who'd taken it over by then, decided it wasn't viable, they would shut it down. That was that. And eventually, in the 1930s, it was decided that it would all be dismantled. This firm, Arnott & Young in Glasgow, did the dismantling. I've been trying to find out much more about them. Even my railway enthusiasts can't find out much about it. But it does seem that they dismantled the viaduct in about 1934. I'll show you a picture in a minute. Then in 1937, they dismantled the route over Bowness Common. Probably trying to work out from reports, they probably took all the rails and sleepers and ironwork out towards Kirkbride, because by then the viaduct had gone. So more damage to the moss. Rather a nice photograph here showing Arnott & Young contracted steam barges working on the Solway and actually taking down the viaduct. So, the track was removed and nothing really remains. Natural England and the RSPB, I'll go on to talk about in a second, they took over a lot of Bowness Common to restore it to wetlands. And in the course of doing so, they carried out various coring exercises along the track, which really showed almost nothing remaining of the original railway. In places you can find ash, clinker. In one place they found large bits of wood, might have been from sleepers. They certainly didn't find any faggots. I think probably the peat was so dried out it was no longer preserving much there anyway. When John and I went there after Christmas, we got to the cutting, and I was just, and we went up onto the embankment, and I was prodding with my walking pole and felt something firm. So we were thrilled, actually, to be able to scrape back the grass and find bits of broken sandstone and bits of clinker here. So there is still a little bit remaining of the ballasting of the track. As of the viaduct itself, you probably know these wonderful sculptural remains just at the end here of the embankment. This is the Bowness embankment, which we beautiful sandstone, red sandstone. I suspect this sandstone came from the Cumberland side, actually, because Mackay's had quarries along the Cumberland side, the red sandstone, and they were employed a bit earlier in the Maryport and Carlisle, building Maryport and Carlisle railway as well. So you can see the sandstone, a lot of it's beautifully dressed, all interlocked, and here are just a few pillars remaining. And there's another view, you can see Criffel there. So it's a very fine place to go to. It's quite difficult to walk along to the end, actually, but well worth it. Finally then, the restoration. This is what it looked like, the track looked like, in about the early 2000s. You can see this is the remains of the track, lots of grass, the bracken, trees have grown up, a great line of birches, lots of heather each side, nothing that indicates this is typical of a raised mire, a peatland. This sort of moss here is very much typical of dry, tussocky ground. It's not a sphagnum at all. So it was quite a challenge for RSPB in Natural England to try and return this to wetland. I've been working with Alistair Brock of Natural England and Dave Blackledge of the RSPB, and there's still quite a lot of work to do in this part of the project. In about the 1990s then, English Nature, as it was then, now Natural England, purchased the track. The RSPB, of course, have got lots of bits of the common there. I showed you an earlier picture of an aerial view, that's to remind you. So here again is the track, and you can see trees all the way along. Not peatland, good peatland each side, very dried out. Here is the Fison's land. Here again is Rogerscuff. So all the idea then, the peatland on each side here was draining, as we know, into the ditches. So the idea was to stop this water flooding out, to raise the water table here again and start trying to get the bog re-wetted. Here at Rogerscuff, there's a ring ditch, which again was used to drain this. This is all lovely peaty soil. If you walk on it, it's beautiful peaty molehills everywhere. But it's not bog. Sorry. So there was a ditch there. This has been blocked up. The RSPB have put in various little ponds. You can't see it. This is quite an early photograph, obviously, before reclamation. And again, lots of blocking of ditches has been going on here and in this bit here, and gradually trying to re-wet this. Now, the main problem, of course, has been these longitudinal ditches. So, the Natural England set about, in about 2004, trying to block the ditches. And this is absolutely stunning bit of engineering, actually, that's gone on. They also had a second phase in 2007, and now we're just waiting. That was 10 years ago. It takes a long time for things to restore. Here in 2004, you can see somebody's surveying the track. They've taken off a lot of peat. And they started constructing dams and barriers, not only across just the ditches, but also right across the track as well, and the ditches, in all kinds of different places. Here you can probably, sorry, because the light's on, it's hard to see, but this black line here is of corrugated plastic put right across the track, so that the track itself isn't acting as a conduit of water. Then this is absolutely amazing photographs for the Natural England, showing what then went on to build these dams. I mean, you've got these incredible metal structures being put in and linked together, hammered in way, way down to block off the track and the ditches on each side. Some of that was done in 2007. This shows you the picture in early and late April. So that's early April. There's a peat and metal. I think this is just the peat dam there. There are metal dams, peat dams, a whole variety of things. You can see the water's already pooling up. Here, a bit later in the month, you can see it's pooling up again. Isn't that fantastic? That's just a month later. And now, looking down the track, it's this kind of waterway. Rather beautiful, I think, rather dramatic. That was 10 years ago. Now, if you go to Rogerscuff Crossing, it's completely surreal. I think it's a wonderful landscape. Stand at Rogerscuff and look down, and there's this sort of skeletal, ghostly birch trees all down the track. The water table has risen so much, of course, that the trees' roots have been drowned, the trees have been drowned, and they've died. And occasionally you see birds sitting on them as well. And there's just so much water there. The wonderful big lakes, in fact. It's a very, very dramatic situation now. So, of course, by raising this water table, the water is no longer flowing out of the bog on either side. And gradually, it's hoped that the vegetation will return. That's just another photograph there. It's a very photogenic place, actually. It's a lovely place to go to. And this is by one of the dams here. Already there's a lot more sphagnum growing, just heading out again each side. So that's really good to see. And what I want to do is go back in the spring and keep seeing, what's happening. There's a lot to do. Now, James's part in this project with his drones, he's been able to get already some fantastic footage. And here we are, the drones looking north from Roger Scuff Crossing, which is just here. This is the edge of the field. Yeah, remember I showed you the drumlin. The farm is up here. Here you can see some of the RSPB's little bunds and ponds there. And here there's a peat dam, there's a metal dam. And look at this, isn't it just an amazing sight? It's really beautiful. We were so lucky to have these lovely days just before Christmas too. Beautiful weather. And that's another of James' stills from his video. There's the Solway. And yes, so we're looking at the North Dams here. And this old Bowness station would be there. So again, you can see that there's huge changes going on. And hopefully the drone views will also begin to show us that there are changes in the vegetation along the track. This isn't a good time of year to see that, but I'm sure we'll gradually see the picture changing as time goes on.
2 minutes.
Yes, right, I'm just about to finish. So to do, well, as I say, it's work in progress. We need a lot more aerial views. I need to look at the southern part going down to Wampool. Need to visit in the spring with somebody really knowledgeable about peat bog vegetation. There's the writing up. The research is always much more fun than the actual writing up, actually. So there's going to be a lot of writing and sorting to do. But what is really missing is personal accounts. Of course, it was demolished in the 1930s. So, this is going back a long way. So, accounts of the demolition of the railway, if you know of anybody who can just remember it or has stories handed down, I would love to know. It's just a pity I don't know of anybody, there'd be nobody alive who can remember the construction. That's a shame. That would have been a really, really interesting piece of oral history. And there's surprisingly little known about the navvies here, although there's lots known about the navvies and other railways. So if you know of anyone, please let me know. Thank you.